I used to believe I had the perfect life. I know everyone says that when they're trying to set up a dramatic story, but in my case, it really did feel like things had aligned the way they were supposed to. I had a wife I adored, a best friend who had been like a brother to me since high school, and a stable, comfortable life that I thought was built on trust and loyalty. Looking back now, I can see the cracks that were always there, the red flags I brushed off because I didn't want to imagine anything could be wrong. But at the time, I walked around with this false sense of security, like my little world was unshakable. I met my wife, Emily, in college. She wasn't just beautiful, though she was, in the kind of effortless way that made people stare when she walked into a room, but she was sharp, witty, and she had this way of making everyone feel like they mattered when she spoke to them. The first time we talked, I was so nervous I probably sounded like a complete idiot, but somehow she smiled at me like she'd been waiting to meet me. We started dating not long after, and within a year we were inseparable. Then there was Ryan, my best friend. I met him years before Emily, back when we were awkward teenagers trying to figure out who we were. He was the kind of guy everyone gravitated toward, funny, confident, the life of the party. Where I was more reserved and cautious, Ryan was bold and reckless. Somehow, the contrast made our friendship work. He pushed me out of my comfort zone and I helped keep him grounded. When Emily came into my life, the two of them hit it off right away. At first, I thought it was perfect. My girlfriend and my best friend actually liked each other. They could joke around, talk about movies, even gang up on me in playful arguments. It felt like I had struck gold. When Emily and I got married a few years later, Ryan was my best man. I can still remember standing at the altar, watching Emily walk down the aisle, feeling Ryan's hand clap my shoulder as if to say, "You're the luckiest guy alive." And I believed it. The three of us became a tight little circle. We went on trips together, had game nights, grabbed drinks on weekends. Sometimes it felt like we were an inseparable trio, and while some people might have been uncomfortable with how close their wife and best friend seemed, I wasn't. I trusted them both completely. Trust was the foundation of everything for me. For years, life felt steady. Work was going well, our marriage was good, Ryan was like family. If someone had told me then what was really happening beneath the surface, I would have laughed in their face. Emily and Ryan? No, it would have sounded absurd. But looking back now, I realize the warning signs didn't come all at once. They crept in slowly, quietly, in ways that were easy to ignore at first. The first red flag was small, almost laughable. Emily started staying up later than usual, claiming she was watching shows on her laptop or catching up on work. Sometimes I'd come into the living room and see her quickly lock her phone, brushing it off with a casual, "Oh, it's nothing, just a silly meme Ryan sent." And because Ryan and I sent each other stupid memes all the time, I didn't think much of it. Why would I? Then there were the excuses. Emily started going out with friends from work, more often, or saying she needed to stay late at the office. Sometimes she'd come home with a vague story that didn't quite add up, but she delivered it with such ease, such confidence, that I convinced myself I was overthinking things. She'd hug me, kiss me on the cheek, and I'd let it go. Ryan, meanwhile, seemed busier too. He'd cancel our usual hangouts, saying he had things to take care of. I didn't question it. We were adults after all. Life gets hectic. People get busy. But then there were moments when something inside me stirred, a gut feeling I couldn't shake. Like the time we all went out for drinks and I caught Emily and Ryan exchanging a look across the table, something quick but loaded, like they were sharing a private joke I wasn't in on. Or the time Emily's phone lit up with a message while she was in the shower, and I glanced at it without meaning to. The name on the screen was Ryan. My stomach tightened, but the message was something mundane, something harmless. Still, why was he texting her so late at night? I told myself I was being paranoid. That's what you do when you love and trust people. You give them the benefit of the doubt. You bury the doubts because admitting them feels like betrayal in itself. But doubts don't stay buried forever. I started noticing patterns. Emily's late nights at work always seemed to line up with times Ryan wasn't available to hang out. When I mentioned this once, half-jokingly, Emily laughed it off and told me I was being ridiculous. Ryan, when I asked him about it, shrugged and said he'd just been busy. Both of them had answers ready, smooth and convincing. Still, the unease kept building. One night, I decided to surprise Emily by picking her up from work. It was something I used to do when we first got married, and I thought maybe it would be a sweet gesture. But when I got there, her office building was dark. The parking lot was nearly empty. I sat there for a few minutes, confused, until I finally called her. She answered on the second ring, sounding flustered. "Oh, I'm just finishing up," she said quickly. A few of us went out for drinks after work. I lost track of time. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But something in her tone didn't sit right. I didn't push though. I drove home, sat on the couch and waited for her. She came in an hour later, smelling faintly of alcohol and perfume, smiling like nothing was wrong. She kissed me, asked how my night was, and I forced myself to smile back. That was the first time the word cheating crossed my mind. Not out loud, not even in a conscious, fully formed thought. But deep down, something inside me whispered it, and once the thought was there, I couldn't unhear it. From that point on, I started noticing more. The way Emily would laugh a little too hard at Ryan's jokes. The way Ryan's eyes lingered on her when he thought I wasn't looking. The sudden, inexplicable tension in the air sometimes when the three of us were together. I wanted to confront them. I wanted to demand answers. But every time I tried to work up the courage, I stopped myself. What if I was wrong? What if I was misinterpreting everything and accusing them of something unthinkable? I didn't want to be the paranoid husband who ruined his own marriage by not trusting the people he loved most. So instead, I carried it all inside. I smiled when I was supposed to. I laughed at their jokes. I played along. But inside, I was unraveling, torn between the love I felt and the suspicion I couldn't shake. It's strange the way your world can feel so solid one day and so fragile the next. At that point, I was still clinging to the idea that things would go back to normal. That maybe I was just stressed, overanalyzing, creating problems where there were none. But deep down, I think I already knew. And the worst part was, I couldn't bring myself to admit it, not to Emily, not to Ryan, not even fully to myself. The night everything finally broke open wasn't dramatic in the way you'd imagine. There wasn't some screaming fight or a public scene. It started with something small, almost mundane, like most life-changing moments do. It was a Friday night, and Emily told me she was going to a work dinner. Ryan, coincidentally, had told me earlier that he couldn't hang out because he was meeting someone. That phrase stuck with me. Meeting someone. He'd said it casually, but it gnawed at me all evening. Around 9:30, I was sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the TV, when I noticed Emily had left her tablet on the coffee table. She rarely used it anymore, but she still had it synced to her phone. A notification buzzed on the screen, and before I could even think, my eyes flicked toward it. It was a message. From Ryan. It wasn't explicit, but it was enough to make my stomach drop. Ryan, can't wait to see you again. Tonight was amazing. My hands went cold. My chest tightened like a vice. I stared at the message, willing it to disappear, to mean something else, anything else. But no matter how many excuses I tried to invent in that moment, maybe it was a joke, maybe it wasn't meant for her, maybe I was misunderstanding, the truth was staring me in the face. My wife. My best friend. I don't even remember standing up, but suddenly I was pacing the living room, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. My thoughts were a blur of disbelief, anger, grief. I felt like the floor had opened up beneath me and I was plummeting into some bottomless void. When Emily came home an hour later, smiling, humming softly as she set her purse down, I couldn't even look at her the same way. It was like staring at a stranger wearing my wife's face. "Hey babe," she said, leaning down to kiss me. I froze. She noticed immediately. "What's wrong?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat was tight, my mind still replaying Ryan's message over and over again like a sick loop. Finally, I managed to say, "How was your work dinner?" She hesitated. Just for a fraction of a second, but I caught it. "It was fine. Long. I'm exhausted." I nodded slowly, staring at her. She looked back at me, frowning slightly, but she didn't push. She went upstairs to shower, humming again as if nothing in the world was wrong. But everything was wrong. That night I barely slept. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind spiraling. I wanted to confront her. I wanted to scream, demand answers, demand the truth. But part of me still clung to denial, to the fragile hope that there was some explanation that didn't involve betrayal. The next day I made a decision. I needed proof. Something undeniable, something I couldn't explain away with excuses. So I started paying attention in ways I hadn't before. I checked phone records. I noticed patterns in her texts, in her absences. I looked for Ryan's name in places I'd never thought to look. And everywhere I turned, there he was. Late-night calls. Frequent messages. Gaps in their stories that lined up a little too neatly. It didn't take long before the picture became clear. The breaking point came a week later. Emily told me she was going to visit her sister for the evening. Something about helping her with a project. But I already knew she wasn't. I knew because Ryan had plans that night too. I waited until she left, then I followed her. My heart was pounding the whole time, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. I felt sick, like I was about to throw up. But I couldn't stop. I had to know. She didn't drive toward her sister's. Instead, she drove across town to a hotel. I parked a few rows back, my chest heaving as I watched her get out of the car. And then, like a nightmare coming to life, I saw Ryan pull up beside her. They didn't see me. They didn't even look around. They just walked inside together, side by side, like they'd done it 100 times before. I sat there for what felt like hours, though it was probably only minutes. My entire body was shaking. My mind was screaming at me, begging me to do something, storm inside, confront them, make a scene. But I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I just sat there, staring at the hotel entrance, feeling like my world had ended. When Emily finally came home that night, I was waiting. She tried to act normal, but the second she saw my face, she froze. "Where were you?" I asked, my voice low, trembling with barely contained rage. "I told you," she said quickly. "I was with my sister." "Try again," I snapped. Her eyes widened. For the first time, I saw genuine fear flicker across her face. "What are you talking about?" "I followed you," I said. The words felt heavy, final. "I saw you. With him. At the hotel." The color drained from her face. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. For a long moment, the room was silent except for the sound of my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. Finally, she whispered, "I'm so sorry." That was it. No denial, no excuses. Just those 3 words. And in that moment, whatever fragile hope I'd been clinging to shattered completely. The confrontation that followed is a blur in my memory. I remember yelling, demanding to know how long it had been going on. She admitted it had been months. Months of lies, months of sneaking around, months of betrayal right under my nose. When I asked why, she couldn't give me a real answer. She said things like, "I didn't mean for it to happen," and "I still love you," and "it just happened." None of it made sense. None of it mattered. What cut the deepest wasn't just that she had betrayed me, it was that Ryan had too. The man I'd trusted more than anyone, the man I'd called my brother, had been sleeping with my wife behind my back. Every laugh we'd shared, every memory, every moment of trust, it all felt poison now, tainted by what they'd done. In the days that followed, I felt like a ghost in my own life. Emily tried to apologize, tried to beg for forgiveness, but I couldn't even look at her without seeing the image of her walking into that hotel with Ryan. She cried, she pleaded, but it was too late. The damage was irreversible. As for Ryan, I cut him off completely. I didn't answer his calls, didn't respond to his messages. Eventually, he showed up at my house trying to explain himself, but I slammed the door in his face. There was nothing he could say that would undo the betrayal. The hardest part was the silence afterward. When the yelling stopped, when the tears dried, when Emily finally moved out, I was left alone with the wreckage. Our house felt empty, haunted by memories that no longer felt real. Everywhere I looked, I saw ghosts, of the life I thought I had, of the people I thought I knew. People always talk about heartbreak like it's just sadness, but it's more than that. It's disorientation. It's waking up in the morning and not recognizing your own life. It's questioning every memory, every conversation, every laugh, wondering if any of it was ever real. I don't know if I'll ever fully recover from what happened. Betrayal on that level, it changes you. It makes you doubt not just other people but yourself. How could I have missed the signs? How could I have been so blind? But if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Sometimes the people you trust the most are the ones who can hurt you the deepest. And no matter how much you love someone, no matter how much history you share, trust once broken is almost impossible to rebuild. I don't know what the future holds for me now. But I know one thing for certain, I'll never look at trust the same way again. When I look back now, it's almost laughable how many red flags were waving in my face. At the time, I convinced myself they were coincidences, overreactions, or just the product of my own insecurities. That's the thing about betrayal, it's not just the act itself that hurts, but the realization that you ignored your own instincts because you wanted to believe the people you loved would never do that to you. After the weekend with the conference, I noticed something change in me. I wasn't fully at ease anymore. My wife's touch felt different. Not in an obvious way, but in that subtle shift where you sense someone's body isn't leaning toward you the way it used to, or where their kiss feels rehearsed, not instinctive. And with Mark, there were little gaps in our friendship that had never been there before. For example, we used to talk about everything, movies, sports, inside jokes from college. But suddenly, whenever I asked him what he'd been up to, his answers grew vague. He'd tell me about work, but in these clipped, non-detailed ways. If I pressed for more, he'd redirect the conversation, sometimes even bringing up my wife in a casual way, as though to remind me that she was part of our shared circle. At first I thought maybe he was just stressed. Work could be overwhelming, and I knew he had some family issues lingering in the background. But then I started noticing how often he seemed to be around when my wife's schedule aligned. For example, she'd say she was going to run errands on a Saturday morning, and then suddenly Mark would text me saying he couldn't hang out because he had plans. I didn't think much of it until I realized those plans almost always lined up with her supposed errands. The thought crept into my head like a virus. Are they seeing each other? I hated myself for even thinking it. This was my wife. This was my best friend. The two people I trusted most in the world. The two people I would have taken a bullet for. But once the thought entered, it wouldn't leave. I told myself I was crazy. I told myself I was paranoid. But then something happened that cracked the foundation even more. One night, my wife was in the shower and her phone buzzed on the nightstand. I don't normally check her phone. We had always respected each other's privacy. But the buzz wouldn't stop. It was 3 messages in a row. I glanced at the screen. It didn't show the name, only the initials MK. My heart dropped. Mark's full name was Mark Kennedy. I didn't touch the phone. I didn't open the messages. I couldn't. Instead, I just stared at it, my chest tightening with each vibration. By the time she came out of the shower, I had forced myself to look away, pretending to be scrolling through my own phone. She picked hers up casually, glanced at the screen, and then put it face down without saying a word. That moment should have been enough, but I brushed it aside. I told myself maybe Mark had messaged about something trivial. Maybe it wasn't even him. But deep down, I knew. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing other things. My wife began dressing differently when she went out. Nothing too obvious, but more effort than usual. She started putting on perfume for errands. She'd leave her phone face down more often, or carry it with her even when she went to the kitchen. Mark also grew harder to reach. He'd cancel plans last minute, give excuses that didn't add up. Once I called him on a Saturday afternoon, and he sounded out of breath when he picked up. He said he was at the gym, but I knew for a fact that the gym he went to closed early on Saturdays. Each small inconsistency felt like a paper cut. Individually, they didn't prove anything. Together, they started bleeding me dry. I began withdrawing, becoming quieter around both of them. My wife noticed. One night, she asked me if something was wrong. I looked at her face, this face I had kissed 1,000 times, this woman I had built a life with, and I wanted so badly to believe her innocence. I almost told her everything I was thinking. But then she reached for my hand and smiled the way she always did, and I swallowed the words. Instead, I told her I was just stressed from work. But the truth was, I was consumed with doubt. My sleep started to suffer. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if the two people sleeping soundly in their separate beds had already stolen the trust one thought was unbreakable. Then came the night everything almost unraveled. It was a Friday evening and I had gone out with some coworkers for drinks. On my way home, I called my wife to let her know I'd be back later than usual. No answer. I tried again, still nothing. That wasn't unusual. Maybe she was busy or had gone to bed early. But as I pulled into the driveway, I noticed something strange. There was a car parked down the street that looked exactly like Mark's. Same make, same model, same dent on the passenger door. I sat there for a moment, staring, my heart racing. Then I told myself I was being insane. This was a suburban neighborhood. Cars like his weren't rare. Still, I couldn't shake the unease. When I walked into the house, everything was quiet. Too quiet. The lights in the living room were off, but there was a faint glow from the upstairs bedroom. I called her name, no answer. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step heavy. When I pushed open the bedroom door, I saw her sitting on the bed, phone in hand. She jumped slightly as if startled. "Oh hey," she said too quickly, locking her phone. "You're home early." I glanced around the room, half expecting to see someone else there. But it was just her. She was alone. My paranoia screamed at me, but I forced a smile and said, "Yeah, we finished earlier than I thought." That night, as she lay beside me, asleep, I stared at her back and realized I was living in limbo. I was trapped between trust and betrayal, between love and suspicion. And I knew something had to give. After that night, I couldn't pretend anymore. I was done gaslighting myself. My gut was screaming, and for the first time in my life, I decided to trust it. I started paying closer attention, not to catch her in a lie but to stop lying to myself. And once I did, the signs became overwhelming. Her schedule grew busier. She worked late, ran errands more often, and her phone became an extra limb she never let go of. When we used to cuddle on the couch, she'd scroll with her screen tilted away from me. If I leaned over, she'd casually press the lock button. Mark was no different. He stopped calling me altogether, and when we did meet, he acted jittery, like every question I asked was a test. I needed clarity. I couldn't live in the fog anymore. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I went through her phone. It was a Wednesday night. She was in the shower, humming softly, completely oblivious. My hands were shaking as I picked up her phone, but I knew her passcode. For years she had told me, "I have nothing to hide." When the screen unlocked, my chest tightened. I went straight to her messages. My stomach churned as I scrolled, then froze. There it was. A thread with MK. The first message I read made me physically sick. "Last night was amazing. I can still feel you." My vision blurred. My fingers trembled as I scrolled further. "I can't stop thinking about you. Wish I was in your bed right now instead of his. You make me feel alive in ways he doesn't." Each word was a knife, twisting deeper and deeper. They weren't talking about friendship. They weren't talking about anything that could be misinterpreted. This was an affair. Clear. Undeniable. My wife, the woman I built my life around. My best friend, the man I trusted more than anyone. Together. I don't know how long I stood there reading their messages. At some point I realized I was gripping the phone so hard my knuckles were white. I wanted to smash it against the wall, but I didn't. Instead, I put it back exactly where I found it, sat on the edge of the bed and tried to breathe. When she came out of the shower, smiling and wrapped in a towel, I looked at her like I didn't even know her anymore. And maybe I didn't. That night I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My chest felt like it was caving in, but I needed a plan. I needed to confront them in a way that wouldn't allow denial or gaslighting. The next few days were torture. I acted normal, went through the motions, but inside I was unraveling. At work, I'd stare at my computer screen without seeing anything. At home, every smile she gave me felt like poison. Finally, I decided to test something. On Saturday, I told her I had to go into the office for a big project. I kissed her goodbye, pretending everything was fine. But instead of going to work, I parked down the street. Hours passed. My heart pounded in my ears. And then I saw it. Mark's car pulling up to my driveway. I gripped the steering wheel so hard it hurt. My worst fear was playing out in front of me. He got out casually, like he belonged there, and my wife opened the door almost instantly, like she had been waiting. I watched him step inside. For a moment I couldn't breathe. It was real. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't imagining things. They were betraying me in my own home. I don't even remember turning the ignition, but suddenly I was driving away. My hands were shaking, my chest was burning, and tears blurred my vision. I couldn't confront them yet. I wasn't ready. That night I didn't sleep. I lay there in the dark, listening to her breathe beside me, wondering if she had whispered his name when she thought of me. The next day I made a decision. I invited Mark over, pretending everything was fine. He came, nervous but trying to act normal. My wife hovered nearby, avoiding eye contact. We sat in the living room, the three of us, like old times. Except now the air was thick with lies. Finally I said, "You know, it's funny. I was looking through some old photos the other day. Remember that trip to the lake? We were so carefree back then." They both nodded, smiling faintly, relieved that I wasn't saying what they thought I might. But then I looked directly at Mark and said, "I found something else too. Messages." The color drained from his face. My wife stiffened instantly. "What messages?" she asked, her voice cracking. I leaned forward, my hands clasped tightly together to stop them from shaking. "The ones where you two talk about how much you enjoy sleeping with each other." The silence that followed was deafening. My wife's eyes widened, filling with tears. Mark's jaw tightened. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them denied it. That silence said everything I needed to hear. I stood up, my whole body trembling. "How long?" I demanded. Still silence. I slammed my fist against the table, startling them both. "How long?" Finally my wife whispered, "A few months." I laughed bitterly. A sound that didn't even feel like it came from me. A few months? In other words, all those times I thought you were at work or running errands, you were with him. Her tears fell, but they weren't for me. They were for herself, for being caught, for losing the comfort of the life we had built. Mark finally spoke. "I never meant to hurt you, man." I turned to him, rage boiling in my veins. "You never meant to hurt me? You slept with my wife. You lied to my face. You ruined everything. Don't you dare sit there and act like you didn't mean to hurt me." He lowered his head, shame flickering across his face, but it wasn't enough. Nothing he could say would ever be enough. I looked back at my wife. Was it worth it? Was destroying our marriage worth sneaking around like a teenager? She sobbed, covering her face. But I didn't feel pity. Not anymore. That was the moment something inside me snapped. The love I had clung to, the trust one had defended, all of it turned to ash. "I want you both out of my life," I said, my voice cold. "You don't get to stay. You don't get forgiveness. You don't get another chance. You made your choice. I walked out of the living room, out of the house, and for the first time in weeks I felt clarity. Pain, yes. Rage, absolutely. But clarity too. I had lost my wife and my best friend in the same breath. But maybe, just maybe, I had finally found the truth I had been denying for too long. And that truth, as devastating as it was the only thing that could set me free. When the confrontation ended and I walked out of my own house, I didn't even know where I was going. I just drove. My hands gripped the wheel, my eyes blurry with tears, my chest heavy like it was caving in. For the first time since I caught them, I wasn't angry. I was empty. I pulled over on a quiet street, turned off the engine, and just sat there. Hours passed, though I couldn't tell you how many. I felt like a ghost watching my own life unravel. Eventually, I went to a cheap motel. I couldn't bear the thought of walking back into that house, knowing what had happened between those walls. The bed smelled like strangers. The living room still held the echo of their laughter. No, I couldn't stay there. That first night alone, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, replaying everything in my head, our wedding vows, the way Mark once toasted me as his brother for life, the nights I had worked late to build a future for us, trusting she was at home waiting for me. Every memory felt contaminated now. The next morning I called my sister. She answered groggily, but when she heard my voice crack, she knew something was wrong. I told her everything, how I'd found the messages, how I'd confronted them. By the time I finished, she was crying too. "You need to get out," she said firmly. "You can't live with her. Come stay with me until you figure things out." So I did. 4 weeks, I lived in her guest room, surrounded by the comforting chaos of her kids. It was the only thing that kept me tethered to reality, hearing them laugh, fight, and just live as if the world hadn't ended. Meanwhile, the fallout spread like wildfire. Word got around fast. Mark wasn't just my best friend, he was part of our larger circle. When people found out what he'd done, opinions split. Some cut him off immediately, disgusted. Others stayed neutral, uncomfortable with taking sides. A few even tried to justify it, saying things like, "Maybe your marriage wasn't as strong as you thought." Those words cut the deepest. As for my wife, she called me every day at first. She begged me to come home, to talk, to work through it. "It was a mistake," she cried. "I got lost. I still love you. But love doesn't look like betrayal. Love doesn't sneak around with your best friend." I filed for divorce. The process was brutal. Sitting in a lawyer's office, dividing up assets, deciding who got what, it felt like dismantling a life brick by brick. Our house went up for sale. I moved into a small apartment. Every time I signed a paper, it felt like signing away a piece of myself. The hardest part wasn't losing the house or the money or even the marriage. It was the loss of identity. For years I was a husband. I was Mark's best friend. I was part of a team, part of a pair. Now I was just me. Alone. Nights were the worst. I'd lie in bed staring at the empty space beside me, haunted by the thought of who had been there when I wasn't. I replayed every memory, every smile, every touch, wondering which ones were real and which were lies. Depression hit me hard. I stopped eating. I stopped caring. I went to work, did what I had to, but the fire was gone. My boss noticed. My coworkers noticed. Hell, even strangers could probably see it. It wasn't until my sister sat me down and said, "You're disappearing. If you don't fight for yourself, they win twice," that something inside me shifted. I didn't want them to win. So I started small. I went to therapy. The first session, I broke down completely, sobbing like I hadn't let myself before. My therapist didn't judge. She just listened. For the first time in months, I felt heard. I joined a gym. At first, I hated it. I was weak, out of shape, exhausted. But as weeks turned into months, I started to feel stronger, not just physically but mentally. Every drop of sweat was a reminder that I was still here, still fighting. I reconnected with old friends. Not the ones tied to Mark, but the ones I had drifted from over the years. Slowly, I rebuilt a circle of people who actually cared. As for Mark and my ex-wife, they didn't last. Maybe 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I heard they had split. Apparently, their little bubble of passion couldn't survive the real world. It gave me a twisted sense of closure. Not joy, not revenge, just closure. Years have passed now. The pain hasn't disappeared, but it's dulled. It no longer controls me. Sometimes I still wonder why. Why her? Why him? Why me? But I've stopped letting those questions eat me alive. Because the truth is, I'll never get the answers. And maybe that's okay. What I do know is this: betrayal breaks you, but it doesn't have to define you. I've learned that healing isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing not to let the pain write the rest of your story. I'm not the same man I was before all this happened. I'm scarred, yes. But I'm also stronger. I know my worth now. I know what I will and will not tolerate. And one day when I meet someone new, and I believe I will, I'll love again. But this time with open eyes, stronger boundaries, and a heart that refuses to settle for anything less than honesty. Because I deserve that. We all do. It's been a few years since the night my world shattered, since the night I found out that the two people I trusted most in this world were capable of hurting me in ways I never thought possible. Looking back now, it feels like I'm talking about a different man altogether. A man who was naive, who thought loyalty was unshakable, and who believed that love alone was enough to protect him from betrayal. That man died the moment I walked into the room and saw my wife and my best friend together. The man speaking to you now is someone rebuilt from ashes, scarred, yes, but stronger, clearer, and strangely enough, freer. The first year was pure survival. I won't sugarcoat it, I was broken. I had trouble sleeping, and even when I did, I woke up with the weight of betrayal pressing down on my chest like a stone. Simple things like going to the grocery store or passing by places where we had shared memories would trigger waves of anger or sadness. For months I obsessed over the why. Why did she cheat? Why did he of all people betray me? Why wasn't I enough? I thought if I could find the answers I could fix the ache inside me. But here's the truth I eventually learned. Sometimes there is no satisfying why. Sometimes people betray you because of their own emptiness, their own selfishness, or their own inability to value what they had. And their choices, no matter how much they hurt you, are not a reflection of your worth. I started therapy about 6 months after everything fell apart. At first, I was hesitant. I thought therapy was admitting weakness. But my therapist helped me see it differently. Going to therapy was an act of reclaiming control, of refusing to let betrayal define me forever. Week after week, I unpacked everything. My pain, my doubts, my anger, even the small pieces of guilt I didn't know I carried. Therapy gave me tools, not to erase the betrayal but to process it, to stop letting it consume me. I also dove back into my career. Work became both an escape and a way to prove to myself that I could still build something meaningful. Slowly, I started feeling competent again, capable again. My confidence, shattered at first, started piecing itself back together. I haven't spoken to my ex-wife in years. The divorce was messy but final. There were moments I wanted closure, wanted her to explain herself, but I realized I'd be waiting forever for words that would never heal me. Closure wasn't something she could give me, it was something I had to give myself. As for my ex-best friend, he tried to reach out once, about a year after it all went down. He sent a long message full of apologies, excuses, and claims that he regretted everything. I didn't respond. Not out of spite, but out of self-respect. Some doors need to stay closed permanently. Eventually, I learned to laugh again. It sounds cliché, but I'll never forget the first time I caught myself genuinely laughing after everything. It felt like a victory. A reminder that betrayal didn't kill the part of me capable of joy. I reconnected with old friends, built new friendships, and started exploring hobbies I'd neglected for years. Traveling became one of my outlets. There's something healing about going somewhere new, where no memory of betrayal lingers in the corners. Dating again was tricky. At first, I didn't trust anyone. Every smile, every promise felt like a setup for more pain. But with time and with a lot of self-work, I realized not everyone is my ex-wife. Not everyone will betray me. Slowly, I opened my heart again. And yes, I did meet someone new. Someone kind, patient, and understanding. We took things slowly, and even now, I guard my boundaries more carefully than before. But that's not fear, that's wisdom. If you've listened to my story this far, maybe you're someone who's been betrayed too. If that's the case, here's what I want you to take away from my journey. Betrayal says more about them than about you. It's not your fault someone else lacked the integrity to honor their commitment. Closure comes from within, and you may never get the apology you think you deserve. Boundaries are everything because betrayal taught me to value myself enough to walk away from people who don't treat me with respect. And healing is possible. It doesn't happen overnight, but the pain does fade. You will laugh again, trust again, and love again if you choose to. Do I wish it never happened? Of course. Betrayal changes you in ways you can't fully undo. But strangely, I'm grateful too. Because in losing them, I found myself. If my wife and best friend hadn't betrayed me, maybe I'd still be living blindly, tolerating cracks in relationships I didn't even see. Maybe I'd still be giving pieces of myself to people who didn't deserve them. Now I know my worth. I know what I will and will not accept. And I've built a life that, while scarred, feels more authentic than the one I had before. Betrayal broke me, but it didn't end me. If anything, it forced me to grow into someone stronger, wiser, and more resilient. So, to anyone listening who's going through something similar, yes, it hurts like hell. Yes, you'll think you can't survive it. But you can. You will. One day you'll look back and realize the people who betrayed you did you a strange favor. They set you free to build a life that's truly yours. That's where I stand today, not bitter, not broken, but free.